Jamie Stegmeyer from Stonemeyer Games, and I'm excited to join you this Wednesday to do as I usually do every Wednesday, answer your questions, discuss some random topics, and share what we're working on here at Stonemeyer Games. There's Biddy joining us in the background. Walter was just back there feeding, and so Biddy's looking for spare scraps back there. I ended last week's video by saying that Biddy had to go to the vet for an infected tail, where apparently Walter bit him in the tail, and that part of his tail got a little infected. But fortunately, the tail was already on the mend. It looked pretty bad, but it was already on the mend, according to the vet, and the vet was right. The tail has continued to get better, and I think an antibiotic shot helped a lot too. Shots and vaccines are good things. What do you know? So Biddy is feeling much better right now. Just wanted to mention that at first. I'll also lead off with today's chocolate of the day. Hopefully you are indulging in something fun today. My chocolate of the day, I actually have a few different choices here because I've been dabbling in a number of different chocolates. But I don't even know what to mention because I have a little chocolate bark that I'll probably have after lunch that has some almonds and sea salt in it. I have some Easter eggs, like chocolate Easter eggs left over from Easter that I've been slowly eating. And I have from Trader Joe's these little tiny peanut butter cups that are really, really delicious. So I'm not eating all those things at the same time, but a little bit here and there will be my chocolate of the day today. Let's see what's going on today. I'm checking over the comments to see if there are any questions so far. Carol asked, how's my dad doing? Carol, thank you for asking about that. He is, so my brief story for those of you who aren't aware of this, my dad had surgery to remove a small part of his intestine that was thought to be cancerous by the doctors. And after that surgery, the surgery went really well, but after the surgery, his intestinal system kind of shut down and he's been in and out of the hospital. I visited him a week and a half ago, or we visited him. Megan and I drove out to Virginia to see him and see my parents, see my family, and he is doing better. He's staying out of the hospital. He's eating better. Still very selective about the foods that he can eat and keep down, but he's doing better with that. And he got the news yesterday that that it is cancer. He's had cancer before. This is a different type. This is a sarcoma of the nerve sheath lining, which apparently is very rare, especially in adults. That was the first opinion from the pathology report. And so he is kind of working through that right now to figure out what that means in terms of the surgery that he already had, which may have removed everything or not. So they're trying to figure that out. So if any of you happen to be specialists for sarcomas of the nerve sheath nerve sheath linings, let me know because my dad's looking for more information about that beyond what we can just Google. And he's obviously talking to doctors in the area as well. Jazz is indulging in something much more healthy than the chocolates that I mentioned, a Nutri-Grain bar apple flavor. That's much healthier than what I'm eating today, Jazz. Well done to you. Tim is going the opposite direction. He says he's had a Reese's with chocolate chip cookie crunch in the middle this morning. That sounds really good. I need to find out where I can get that. Steven says, am I planning on backing Mosaic? I see some similarities to Tapestry. That's a good question, Steven. It does look interesting. The tough thing for me, though, is that I basically, actually I need to close my window over here. So Tapestry was the civilization game that I always wanted to exist. And so I designed it. I wanted a civilization game where that spanned many, many centuries, that wasn't just about like food storage at the moment or how happy your people are right now. Like it spans thousands of years, and where you can create your own history. It's not tied to real world history, and it's very streamlined to play. And so I designed that game, and that game is Tapestry, and it exists. And so it's now, other than Seven Wonders, which is a very different game, very light on the Civ side, I am not as drawn to other Civilization games because I designed the Civ game that I want to exist. I know that isn't the most respectful thing for a designer to say about other designs, but we kind of pick and choose the games that we play and that we pursue. And if I'm going to play a Civ game, I'm going to either play Seven Wonders or Seven Wonders Duel, or I'm going to play Tapestry. So I had my eye on Mosaic, but as a Civ game, it doesn't immediately capture me. I should probably dig a little deeper into the mechanisms to see if Civ aside, the mechanisms excite me. Ben says that Joe is the man. Thanks for taking care of me. Thanks to hear that feedback about our Director of Communications, Joe. I agree that Joe is doing a great job, Ben. And I'm glad to hear that we were able to serve you in that way. Let's see. Carol says, have I played Beyond the Sun? I have played Beyond the Sun in person. I haven't played the board game arena implementation yet. And so I need to try that. Carol mentioned that. She says, playing my first game on Board Game Arena and seems up your alley with the removable pieces on your player mat, upgrading your productions. You know, I did a video about player mats recently, and I completely forgot that Beyond the Sun used the player mats with that method of removing things from your player mat and improving your income. That was a big miss by me. I need to make a note about that for that video. So I will make a quick note about that for Beyond the Sun. My video this past week was a fun one to do because I did a video about my favorite spoilers in tabletop games. And I really had to, I usually don't do this for videos, but I went through and marked the time stamps for every individual game on the top 10 video. So if you've played, say, Pandemic Legacy Season 2, you can watch that segment and see my favorite spoiler in that version of Pandemic, but not necessarily see the spoilers for other Pandemic Legacies or other games. So if you if you're careful about spoilers like I am, and you want to see and talk about and share some of your favorite spoilers in tabletop games, feel free to check out my video from this past Sunday in which I do talk about them. Yeah, that was fun to do. Obviously, I don't want to give away any spoilers here, but it was fun to talk about spoilers in an open format, but in a way that protects people who don't want to know those spoilers yet. And this video for this coming week, what am I doing? Oh, we have my favorite Uwe Rosenberg games. That'll be the video coming out this coming Sunday. I've already filmed it, and we will release that on Sunday. I also did videos. What were my other recent videos? About, let's see here, scrolling through my list. I got to play Keyforge Dark Tidings this past weekend, and so I filmed a video about that. That's the new Keyforge set. I haven't played Keyforge in quite some time, but I got together with some friends and played Keyforge Dark Tidings. That'll be my video on Friday. I talked about The King's Dilemma yesterday, which is a legacy game that I'm currently 6 games into in a 5-person game. We've been meeting every other weekend for 3 games in a row and are really, really enjoying it so far. That's The King's Dilemma. Having a lot of fun with that. I love legacy games. It's such a brilliant format. I'm so grateful that Rob Daviau invented that format for games. Although some people say that Dungeons and Dragons is the original legacy game, but I think it's a little different than making games that feature permanent changes that can't be undone. That's what a legacy game is, right? When you have permanent things, and that permanence is what separates a legacy game from a campaign game with persistent elements. Arthur says, can we expect an IP game for Charlie and the Chocolate Factory? I do love chocolate, and I actually do love the works of Roald Dahl, but no, I don't have any Charlie and the Chocolate Factory games in the works. Let's see. Richard says he is the Adrenaline Rush King. He says, oh yeah, Richard contacted me recently. I know what Richard's referring to there. He says, pick one movie and explain your answer, please. National Lampoon's Vacation from 1983 or Airplane from 1980. Well, I'll go with National Lampoon's Vacation there, but I'll add a third answer. I actually really enjoy the new Vacation movie that has, who is the star of it? Ed, I forget his last name. There's a reboot of the Vacation movie, and I actually liked it a lot more. And perhaps it's because the original one is a little dated, and the new one's a little fresher and new. But I laughed a lot in the new movie, so I'm going to pick that as my pick, as my kind of cheat pick there for this selection. Chris asked, how are Biddy and Walter doing? I mentioned earlier in the video that Biddy's tail is healing well, and Walter is also doing well. Walter joined me for sit-ups this morning. Got some core workout done for Walter on the carpet this morning. He seemed to enjoy that. Made my workout a little more difficult than normal. Justin says, I've been thinking about the growth of the board game industry and started wondering if hobby board game companies will ever have IPOs. Gotta remember what IPO stands for. That's like when initial public offering. That's when you become a publicly traded company. There is one company, cool mini or not, is a publicly traded company on the Hong Kong stock market index, I believe. Justin says, can you imagine Stonemaier Games ever going public and eventually traded on the New York Stock Exchange? How far off are we from hobby board game companies from doing that? Well, like I said, Simon has already done that, cool mini or not. I haven't seen many other companies do that. I don't even know if Asmodee is publicly traded. I don't see Stonemaier Games doing that. I like having a very small group of shareholders who buy in privately and join kind of a roundtable discussion group for us to make decisions about. In fact, I'm doing my shareholder update to them today, and we'll have some discussions about some decisions to make. But publicly traded is just a different animal. I think when you become a publicly traded company, your bottom line and your value to your shareholders, your giant group of shareholders, becomes, I think, your top priority. And I'd rather my top priority remain serving customers, like making great stuff and serving for customers and serving customers. Like that's my focus, and that's been the focus from day one, and I want that to continue to be the focus until the last day of Stonemaier Games. So, uh, yeah, that's my stance on it. I think that sums it up pretty well. Jesse has a nice comment about his about Mother's Day. Yeah, Mother's Day was this past weekend, and Jesse said that their mother was so impressed by the design of Wingspan, and it brought her such joy. She and I bought the digital version, and will be playing online to get, going forward. Thank you, Elizabeth, Jamie, and team. That's a wonderful comment. Thank you, Jesse, for saying that. Tonk says, "Do you have a monthly board game purchase budget for your household?" I don't know. I would say that I do buy most of the games in my household, though Megan is an avid gamer herself. I'm just much more in tune with new releases and Kickstarter. But I have kind of an internal budget. I keep an eye on my overall. I have what I would call a miscellaneous budget. So every month I look at how much I spent on food and games, and I keep an eye on that. I don't limit myself, but I kind of chide myself if I see myself go over or go way beyond my average for either of those expenditures on a month-to-month basis. So board games are lumped into that miscellaneous category and compose a pretty good portion of it, I would say. Some great questions today. I'm loving the questions today. I wanted to mention to you all that today is my 23rd month anniversary with Megan, or our 23rd month anniversary. So we're celebrating that in a low-key manner today, but I am very happy to continue my wonderful relationship with Megan. And as part of that, last week, many of you asked questions to Megan that she might answer on a future live cast. She asked for the questions to be asked in advance so she can think about them. It doesn't have to be put on the spot, as I'm very used to from these videos, even though I many times still stumble over the answers. But Megan is going to join us in a month when we have our 2-year anniversary. So she'll join us on a video, not exactly on the anniversary day, but close to it on a Wednesday to answer some of your excellent questions asked last week and on the YouTube version of the video. So I'm excited to have her on for a few minutes on a future video. And I wanted to mention our anniversary today. Yeah, I think that is one of the personal topics on today's chat. I have a few other little things like that. I did just a fun little thing. I ate at a restaurant for the first time in a year the other day. We actually, that's not entirely true. On a road trip, we did eat at a restaurant, but no one else was around at all. This was a restaurant. It was still outside. I met up with a friend of mine and we ate at Grace Meat Plus 3 here in St. Louis. I wanted to try their tofu sandwich, which is a little odd for a restaurant that has meat in the name of the restaurant, but they had a really good tofu sandwich. So I tried that out. And we ate outside on a park bench. We were the only people on the park bench, and the park benches were spaced out pretty far away. And it was really nice. It was really, really nice to. I definitely miss eating at restaurants or eating outside of restaurants, and it was nice to do that for the first time in a long time. I am fully vaccinated. I still wear a mask all the time when I'm outside, and definitely indoors if I ever go indoor into a public space. But this was the first time kind of eating outside and not wearing a mask while eating something because you can't do that while you're eating. And it was really nice. So I just wanted to throw that out there. That's something fun that I did recently. Let's see. Tom says, for my previous comment, it must soon be Stonemeier's 10th anniversary. If so, any plans to celebrate personally and in general? Would love to see party-themed viticulture tapestry scythe promo cards or other party-themed accessories to celebrate. Thank you for sharing that idea, Alex. Or Tom, I'm sorry, Tom Alex. Our 10-year anniversary is coming up next year. So the company was founded in 2012. That was when I consider the official kind of start date for some of our games, the day that Viticulture funded on Kickstarter in, I believe it was early September, maybe late August 2012. I don't know the exact date offhand. And so this is 2021. Next year will be the 10-year anniversary. We don't have anything planned in terms of products yet for that anniversary, but we'll definitely be doing some forms of celebrations that welcome the people who play our games, definitely. I don't know yet how it will be if it will be product oriented at all. We are not a party game company, so I don't see the products being party oriented. In fact, my ideal version of a party is just a few people playing board games in a low key manner, probably Euro games like the ones that we make. So I don't know what we're going to do for that yet, but it is coming up in a little over a year. Cameron asked for my thoughts on Marvel United, and I haven't played it. I don't know yet. And Cameron, I guess I should clarify this. You said, I know you aren't necessarily a fan of the way Simon uses Kickstarter. I wouldn't necessarily say that. I don't mind that Simon uses Kickstarter. I guess you said the way that they use Kickstarter. I don't even mind that so much. I don't pay too close of attention to their Kickstarters nowadays because they're you typically more than I want to spend on a game up front, well in advance of the game being delivered. But I think they do a fairly decent job. I think they've had a number of missteps in terms of like releasing the things before Kickstarter backers get them, things like that. But in general, they kind of use Kickstarter in a traditional way. They throw something big on Kickstarter, have a bunch of stretch goals, and yeah, I'm perfectly fine with that. Chris says, "Who would win in a fight between a shark and a tiger?" She says, or he says, the fight is in shallow water, say 10 feet deep. Um, I guess if they have to be fighting, I don't love the idea of animals fighting, but if a shark and a tiger have to fight, um, who do I think would win? I'll give it to the shark, especially in water. I'll give it to the shark. Yeah. I mentioned that I played King's Dilemma and Dark Tidings recently. I also played on Board Game Arena, Seven Wonders Duel, and Iwari. That's Iwira, a game from Thundergriff Games, and I'll have a video about that coming out in about a month. I'm pretty far ahead on my game design videos right now. And personally, I've been working on a couple different game designs recently, games that won't be ready for release, definitely not this year, but maybe next year, maybe 2022, 2023. And I've had a lot of fun working on them this week, so I'm excited about that. Next week, I think I should finally have the second prototype of the Wingspan big box prototype. And again, this is just a box with an organizer inside of it. It won't have any gameplay components, but it will serve to store all Wingspan components, past, present, and future, including third-party accessories. It's not designed for a specific third party, but it's designed so that it's modular enough for you to drop in, big bird tokens from Wingspan or Top Shelf Gamer, or even drop in the entire custom insert from a company like Broken Token. It is designed for all that. I will hopefully show you that on a video next week or in the Wingspan Facebook group. So if you're not in the Wingspan Facebook group and you're curious about that, I might do the live stream there instead at a random time whenever I receive the box. But I'll definitely show it on camera here just for a few minutes whenever it arrives. In fact, I have a number of samples of different things coming from Panda soon that I'm definitely looking forward to. And I'll show them on camera here. What else is going on? I'll jump back to questions that'll come back to my random topics. Oh yeah, I do have a few other fun random topics here. James says, any news on the next Wingspan expansion or the Viticulture expansion? Don't have any news yet about either of those. Those will be 2022 releases, things that I talk about in 2022. Tommy says, howdy from Texas. He says, I finally bought Euphoria, which is awesome. Thanks for buying Euphoria. And my group is ready to play it. We play a lot of Scythe. Any advice for a 4-player game for Euphoria newbies? Actually, in the rulebook of Euphoria, this is something that I haven't done in every rulebook, but I believe in the rulebook for Euphoria near the back, I have some teaching / learning tips. So I think those will actually give you a lot of guidance as to how to teach and learn Euphoria, especially and I have a video about it too. There's actually a how to teach Euphoria video online. I recommend checking that out. The main tip I give there is focus on one specific area of the board, because each area of the board essentially mimics the other areas with slightly different resources. But the tunnels are very similar, the commodity areas are very similar. And so rather than, it can be a lot to look at the entire board all at once, but if you say everybody, okay, I'm going to teach this area of the board, and this is all you need to know because you can apply this to the other areas, I think that can really help the teaching process of the game. I hope you have fun with your first play of it, though. Carlos says he's keeping my father in his thoughts. Thank you, Carlos, for doing that. I appreciate that. And he says, I really like your last expansion names, plans, employees, and secrets and soirees. How important do you think an expansion name is? Will you continue to use word plays in the future? I do like alliteration. There's no real reason for it, but I do like it. And so a lot of our expansion names have alliterations. And the nice thing about pairing two words together is that it can often encompass very different aspects of the expansion, especially if the expansion is more than just one thing. So that's kind of the thought process I put into it. What is a nice alliteration, and what are two core elements of the expansion that we can encapsulate in 2 words for our expansion names? Jesse also asked how's Biddy, and Biddy is doing much better thanks to a visit to the vet last week. His infected tail is healing quite well. Tom asked, what are Megan's thoughts on questions from last week? And Megan does have answers for those questions, but she'll join us in about a month to answer those questions. Chris says, have I done any videos about companion apps or app-driven games? I do indeed have a top 10 video about my favorite games that rely on apps. I'm thinking about how exactly I worded it so you can look for it, but I think I used the term app-driven, app-driven. If you search for that on my YouTube channel, you should be able to find that. If anyone wants to find that and post it here, that would be great. Brian chimed in to say that Ed Helms is the actor I was thinking of who was in the new Vacation movie. Tim says, do I think that some of the recent Kickstarters need a price adjustment? I was interested in several games, including Mosaic and the Castle Panic Deluxe, but they're a bit up there in price. Also, don't like how some make the standard edition seem much less than the all-in, while not making the price any easier for those on the fence. I think those are 2 great points, Tim. I don't want to point at those 2 projects necessarily. I haven't looked too closely at them myself, but I wrote an article last year saying that I was a little surprised by how high some of the prices were on Kickstarter, given the margins when you were selling directly to consumers, especially given that you're accepting that money so far in advance of you actually releasing the game to those customers. So I think all too often Kickstarter creators are thinking about the eventual retail price for the game, whereas the Kickstarter is very different than the retail version, not even the retail version of the game, but the retail price of the game. You are selling directly, your margins are much better, and again, you're asking for money far in advance. So I think, I say this not to judge creators, but rather because I think they will get more backers and have a better boost early on in the launch of these products if they have better price points. And Tim, I think you make a great point too about if you are going to have a retail edition or a basic edition on the Kickstarter campaign, that's the low price version. That price should be very, very appealing, in my opinion, similar to what we did with Red Rising. Even though we don't sell the retail version directly, the retail version of Red Rising is $40, and you'll probably be able to get it lower than that from many retailers because we want an easy buy-in price for the game. The collector's edition is $65, but that $65 price is also very flexible because we're the only ones that sell the Red Rising Collector's Edition. So we can offer it at a nice champion discount. We can discount the price beyond that if we want. We can offer promo codes. We have a lot of flexibility on that price as well. Those are a few off-the-cuff thoughts about that. But I would say my article last year applies directly to what you're seeing in a few projects right now. Mark says, the more I play Red Rising, the more impressed I am with the card interactions. How did you go about playtesting so many different cards? It actually followed our pretty regular playtesting process of us playtesting locally and then bringing that version of the game to a broader assortment of blind playtesters around the world, and then going back to playtesting locally and doing it over, repeating that. We repeated that process quite a few times for Red Rising because it was a long development process. We had a lot of time. And so rather than doing 3 or 4 waves, I think we did 5 or 6 waves of blind playtesting for Red Rising. And I think that seemed to help how those cards all interacted and combined. But a lot of it also was the great design. I don't want to compliment my own design. I'll compliment Alex's, though, my co-designer. I think he did a great job of bringing theme and variability into a lot of the cards. I'll answer, let's see, 2 more questions, and I'll go back to some random topics that I have. Lots of great questions today. Thank you again. Eric says, I was so happy to see you playing the game The Red Cathedral. I posted a video about it recently. He says, because I'm from Barcelona, as are the authors of the game. I would like to ask you, what improvements or changes would you make to the game? And my second question, when will be available the second expansion from Tapestry? I'll do the second, actually, both of those are pretty easy questions. One, I don't actually talk too often about what I think would be improvements for games. I was really happy with my play of Red Cathedral. Every now and then I might do a house rule in a game, but it's very rare. Typically, I'll either play a game or I won't play it based on how I liked it. And I really like the Red Cathedral. It's stayed in my collection. I look forward to playing it again. So I can't think of any improvements for it. Yeah, I haven't, I don't enter the role. I think a lot of designers do that. They play a game and they're like, how would I make this game better? Whereas I try to play a game and I try to learn from the fun elements and the frustrating elements of it and apply them to my own designs. Yeah, that's just my approach. I'm not often thinking about how I would modify someone else's game. And the second expansion from Tapestry, that will be available later this year, later in 2021. And I'll answer one more question, then I'll jump to a few random topics real quick. Jonathan says, what recommendations do you have for a two-player Legacy game? I played Charterstone, and I'm looking for a game to play Legacy style with my 9-year-old. He's played Risk Legacy, but we can never get a third. Okay, so you have a two players. What would be good? Well, Megan and I did play Pandemic Legacy Season 0 together, two players, and we had a lot of fun with it. We also have two friends right now who are playing Clank Legacy together just as a two-player game, and they seem to really be enjoying that as well. Um, so those are two. I'll throw those two out there: Pandemic Legacy Season 0 and Clank Legacy. I played Clank Legacy with four players, so I can't exactly speak to that, but I think it could work pretty well at two players as well. Yeah. So let's jump to some other random topics. Oh, sumo wrestling is back. I mentioned this because there every other month there is a big sumo tournament in Japan, and if you're interested in watching their daily recaps, they're about 30 minutes, and you can even skip through them and make them a little faster. It is one of my favorite things that I do every morning. I spend about 10 minutes watching one of these videos, skipping forward in it. And if you Google Grand Sumo Awesome, then you will see the site that posts these videos. And it's tough to, I think, appreciate the sport without getting a full explanation of it. But there are YouTube videos too that you can check out that explain the tournament format and why each bout is important, the different styles. It's pretty cool. It's a very different sport than I think that I'm used to here in the U.S., but I've really enjoyed getting into it and really enjoy it. So the tournament is happening right now. You can check on a daily basis at Grand Sumo Awesome to see the highlights. Also, even more random than that, I recently remembered, and basically, in short, this is a weird thing to say, but I talk in my sleep. And I discovered that years ago, and I downloaded an app called Sleep Talk. And I recently remembered that I had that app. I haven't used it in a while, and so I've been turning it on at night. And I've been laughing in my sleep a lot recently. So I think I have been internally very happy about something, or very uh, tuned into humor recently. But yeah, I know that's a very random thing to say, but I wanted to mention it partially because if you are a sleep talker, I'd highly recommend the Sleep Talk app because it basically keeps your microphone on, but it only records when you are actually making noise at night, whether you're talking, laughing, snoring, things like that. Um, and then otherwise it's not recording anything. And in the morning you can check to see what sounds you made that night. And I've just been having fun with it. I thought it might be fun to share that I have apparently been internally very happy at night with my sleep laughing. Super weird. Hopefully, I didn't make any of you uncomfortable by saying that. Now you know what happens to Jamie at night. Arthur says, a question regarding digital implementations. I noticed that among your published games, different companies have been hired for different digital implementations. Is there a specific reason for this? Do you intend to keep searching and eventually settle with a single company? There is a reason for that. Yeah, the reason is, um, with I yeah, so it's a little hard to explain, but basically, as someone who didn't have any digital versions of our games published, the only information I had about other companies, digital developers, was the what I could experience by playing their games. But I didn't actually know what it was like to work with these companies. Did they meet deadlines? Did they communicate well? Did they keep things quiet? Did they engage the community? Things like that. And so I wanted to test a wide variety of different companies to find out those that I worked really well with and those that didn't work as well with. And that's why I've had pretty much every game created by a different digital developer so far, and have had very different experiences with all of them. So I'm glad that I took that approach. However, there are certainly some companies that I think have done better jobs than other companies. And those are the companies, now that I know which ones they are, that I'd like to work with in the future. The other reason, though, is that most of these companies are pretty small and it takes a long time to develop a game. And so they typically only work on one or two games at a time. And so I can't give all of our games to one company. And I don't think one company would want to take all of our games. It's better for them to have a diverse portfolio of games from other companies. But there are a few companies that I think have done an exceptional job that I want to work with in the future. Yeah. And actually, that's kind of my weekly reminder to check in to see how the Tapestry, not the Tapestry digital version. I trust that Tim's doing a good job with that, but the board game arena version is coming along because I think it's been a year in the works now. I would have hoped that it would be live because Viticulture I think is going to be on board game arena much faster, and that started like many months after Tapestry did on board game arena. Hopefully, they're still working through it. Callie says, I really enjoyed Pendulum, which prompted us to buy Viticulture because I'm really enjoying worker placement. Loved it. Are there more worker placement games in the Stillmeyer future? Thank you for asking that, Callie, and I appreciate you saying that about Viticulture and Pendulum. And actually, a few of our games, other games, are worker placement as well. Charterstone is a village building worker placement legacy game, and Euphoria is a dice worker placement game. The workers are the dice that you're placing in the game. Am I forgetting any others that are also worker placement games from us? Let's see. Some people say that Scythe is a worker placement game, but it's not. It's an action selection game. Let's see. Charterstone, Euphoria, Pendulum. Tapestry is also not a worker placement. Viticulture, yeah. So those are our only worker placement games so far. But feel free to check out Charterstone and Euphoria if you're looking for other worker placement games. You can also check out. I revisit worker placement every now and then because I really do love worker placement, and I do have a video about my favorite worker placement games that's on YouTube, and I think there might even be two versions of that video because I have revisited. I'm pretty sure I've revisited that video over time. But yeah, there are lots of great worker placement games out there. Tim said he recently taught Red Rising. Thank you for Tim and anyone out there who's teaching Red Rising to other people. I really appreciate you sharing our new game with the world. Oh, and I haven't even talked about the kind of the big news, Between Two Castles expansion. Last week, I announced the Between Two Castles expansion, and today I've already revealed all the content that's in this expansion and have revealed the rulebook. So the rulebooks for Between Two Castles, the Altama rulebook and the core rulebook are now available online, along with photos, many of them from photographer Tim Chuan, I think, are available. Here's the expansion box itself. They are all available online. So yeah, they are all available for you to check out now. All that content, all the design diaries are posted, and you will soon see reviewers share content-related videos and then opinion-related videos next week, followed by the pre-order on May 26th, which will be followed by shipping of the expansion in June. Yeah, really excited about that, and excited that all information is out there. Usually it takes a little bit longer than a week, but it's an expansion, so there's less there are less stories to tell, I would say, than a brand new product where we have a lot of stories to tell about the product. Carol says, are Megan and I planning a mini trip for our 2-year anniversary? I don't know. I don't know what we've decided to do. We haven't made a decision yet about what to do for the 2-year anniversary, but I'm sure it'll be something fun, something that we'll do together, and we're working on that. We're talking about that, trying to figure out what we will do there. Yeah, don't quite know yet. Bruce says, congrats on 23 months. He says 23 means a lot to his wife and I. He says, both of us are born on the 23rd. Her father is born on the 23rd, and I proposed on a 23rd. That's really cool, Bruce, that you kept that 23rd connection going. That means you got to do something big for your 23rd anniversary, too. What do you have planned for your 23rd anniversary, Bruce? Jeff says, since you designed the Between Two Castles expansion to fit seamlessly into the original box, did you ever consider an alternative disposable packaging option for the expansion, or would this be a shipping nightmare? I definitely thought about it, Jeff. Cardboard, fortunately, is one of the more friendly things to recycle. So I imagine that a lot of people are going to get this box and are going to recycle it after putting the insert into the core game box. So I think we went with a fairly environmentally friendly option because the alternative would probably be plastic, and plastic is not as environmentally friendly. So we did keep it in mind. I think we went with a responsible option, but I'm certainly open to other ideas. I think maybe a slightly more environmentally friendly version would be a plastic bag, even though plastic bags are rarely recyclable. It's just less material to make a plastic bag, less of a carbon footprint, but that would probably have resulted in damages in shipping. And we don't want the insert to arrive damaged because the insert is what you need to permanently store the expansion in the original Castles box. So we did think about it. I'm certainly open to ideas, though, if people have other ideas, other things they've seen from other companies. Sam says he's very excited for the Secrets and Safari's expansion, an expansion for one of his favorite games. He says, what's your favorite part? I'm most excited about the secret rooms. And Sam, that's the same here. I love the thematic idea of having a secret passageway, a secret room in your house. In fact, I'm wondering, while we're talking about this, because secret rooms are a big part of this expansion, do any of you have a secret passage or something secret in your house? You don't even have to reveal it if you truly want to keep it a secret, but a secret room, a secret passage, some little nook and cranny that that unlocks if you do something cool. I don't know, you pull a book out from the bookshelf, things like that. I love that. I really want that at one of my houses someday. My real life, my condo, my house, something like that. But I love that theme so much that I love how it works thematically and mechanically in the Between Two Castles expansion as well. Tonk says, where did I go to college? Did I enjoy my college experience? That's a fun question. I went to college at Washington University in St. Louis. That's how I ended up here in St. Louis and why I've stuck around. I've actually never lived, ever since coming to St. Louis, I haven't lived more than 5 minutes from the university. I know the area around it so well that I've stuck close by. And I would say, I had a pretty good college experience. There were definitely too much for me to say good and bad on video, but I can say that the best choice I made in college was studying abroad. I studied abroad in Japan for my entire junior year, and it was the perfect time to do it. And I'm so glad that I did it and that I did it for a year. I think a lot of people study abroad for a semester, which is great. It's better than nothing. But I think you're almost just getting your feet wet by the end of a semester and get feeling like you belong, that you're getting acclimated, that you're assimilating a little bit. And so I'm so glad that I had another semester after that to continue the friendships with friends in Japan that I made during that first semester. So that was kind of the highlight of my college experience. But I also had a good time here, actually, in St. Louis at Washington University. Frank is joining us today from the City of Games. He says, was there any part of working on Red Rising in regard to using the IP that added unexpected complications or limitations to the business side of publishing the game? Frank, I do have an article recently that you might check out. You probably have maybe seen it on my blog about the intellectual property side of Red Rising. I dug pretty deep into this in that article, so you might check that out. But in terms of unexpected complications or limitations, honestly, the only difficult we encountered was the legal side, like actually getting permission. Not from It wasn't from Pierce really. It was the lawyers that were kind of holding up the whole thing for a long time because of rights that were tied to other media. Uh, I don't really know exactly what was going on behind the scenes, but I suspect that there was a contract with a production company, and that production company wanted to have or thought they had the rights to tabletop games, and they kind of put up a fight with the lawyers. I don't know for sure. I suspect that was happening behind the scenes a little bit, and eventually I went to Pierce and I was like, look, like we have this game ready. We're super excited to make it, and I want to move forward with it. But this legal stuff is taking forever. Can you push it a little bit? Can we actually make it happen, or is it just not going to happen? And we'll move on. We'll retheme it or something like that. And I think at that point, Pierce stepped in, and possibly this is all hypothetical. This is all conjecture. I think he may have realized that hey, we actually had made the thing while this production company was just holding the rights, and they hadn't actually made a TV show, a movie, or anything for Red Rising. And I think he basically said, hey, this company has actually made the thing. They're ready to make it. Let's move forward with it. That was the main unexpected thing, just how slow the legal side of it was. Again, not attributed to Pierce at all. Really more attributed to the lawyers, I think, that just took their sweet time figuring out what could have been a very simple decision. I know it's not actually simple, but that was the unexpected element of it. Arthur says, how many game submissions do you typically receive per month? It averages around 20 to 30 per month. Yeah. Although that's a guess off the top of my head. Alan is the one who sees those submissions. Enric says, I'm planning to play the Tainted Grail campaign with my friend, and I'm asking why is it not one of your top board games? A personal preference. I played one game. I don't know. I played one session of Tainted Grail, and I thought it was a really interesting game. Had some really interesting mechanisms. I have a video about it that explains those mechanisms, but it just wasn't a game that I was drawn to go back and replay. Just I don't know if there's a specific reason for it. It's a game that, like many games, I admire. I think it was doing pretty well, but I think it's a pretty solid game, pretty ambitious game, really. I think I used that term in the video, but just wasn't one that I returned to, opposed to like Clank Legacy, which has some very similar elements, is a lot less dark, has a much lighter tone, but still gives you a ton of interesting decisions. I think it's a little bit more streamlined. I don't know. I don't want to go comparing the two, but yeah, just personal preference. Justin says, I recently played Red Rising solo and found it the easiest solo game from Stonemaier Games, and also a lot of fun. He says, I know you don't design the Automa, but do you offer any input on the designs from Morton, or is all done by Morton and his team? My main input comes in as from the publisher perspective. Like Morton will come to me and say, hey, we want to put this component in the game, or can we put this component in the game? And I'll tell him if it's possible or not. Usually I give him free reign. I try to say yes as often as possible. If he thinks the component is necessary, I say yes. But every once in a while, I might say, like, Morton, do you actually need this card to be this weird size or things like that? Because we're trying to have all cards at this size, things like that. That's my main input into the Automa process for the solo versions of our games. Landon says, are there any games that you play often that you'd like to see a new expansion for just to mix up gameplay a bit, or any game you feel has room for an expansion? Let me think of any game. That's a great question. It's a great question. Um, I'm trying to think if there's any game that I played a lot recently or played a lot over time that I'm like, oh, I'm really eager for the expansion for this game. And it's actually pretty rare that I feel that way. If I really love the core game, it's kind of a catch-22 here, because if I love a game enough that I want an expansion, I probably love the core game enough that I don't feel that it needs an expansion, because it already feels like a very complete experience to me. So off the top of my head, I can't actually think of one. There might be one out there, but I can't think of one off the top of my head. Let's see if there's any other little questions here. Oh, some blog topics I covered recently. One is Stonemaier Games related, which is that we recently implemented a 20-day price guarantee. So it basically means whenever you buy a product from Stonemaier Games, within the next 20 days, if you see that we've listed a better sale price or we issue a promo code for that product and you could have just waited and got a better price, you can now contact us. You contact Joe specifically and say, hey, I bought this product for $40, but you're now offering it for $35, and we will refund that difference. Basically, we're trying to let you buy with confidence directly from our web store if that's your preferred way to buy our games. Rather than waiting for a better price later, you can buy it today, and we'll match that price on our web store. Price is only on our web store for the next 20 days. So that's something we implemented recently. I wrote about that on our blog last week. I also did kind of a potpourri blog entry this past Monday about things that I struggle to actually connect with crowdfunding and entrepreneurship, tabletop entrepreneurship specifically, which are the normal topics that I cover on my blog. But I talked about the Mr. Beast YouTube channel and stunt philanthropy on his channel. I talked about Neconomics, which is the economics behind having a cat representative for your company. I talked about a live streamer who added 10 seconds to his live stream for everyone who subscribed to it, meaning that he ended up being live for a full month. And I talked about the competition that goes on every year among self-published fantasy book authors. I forget the exact acronym now. It's like SPFO. It's a 5-letter acronym. You can see it on the blog post where I talked about this very interesting format for a competition to highlight self-published fantasy book authors. And wondering if there's a corollary to the board game industry as well. Those are some recent blog entries I did. Just to cover the last topic that I had on my list, we recently listened to a really great podcast called How to Save a Planet on the long drive that we had from Virginia to St. Louis and vice versa. And one of the things they brought up was a company that is making kelp burgers. So burgers out of seaweed, essentially. And so we ordered some burgers from this company. I think they are arriving today, and I'm super curious to try them to see what these kelp burgers will taste like. It's a fully vegetarian burger made out of kelp. I'm curious if any of you have ever tried anything like that, because it just sounds very different than any burger that I've ever tried. Arthur says, and so the rest of the video, I'll just focus on questions. So if you have any questions for me, I will answer them in the rest of the video. Arthur says, in a typical work week, how much time would you actually spend designing your games? Do you separate whole days for that? Do you have flexibility when creativity comes? Creativity comes every day. I would say in different waves, different for different projects. But there is very rarely a day where I am not driven to create something. The catch is the time. How much time do I actually have? So typically in the evening, I spend maybe an hour or two, depending on when we finish dinner, working on some form of design. And if I'm lucky, I have maybe an hour or two in the afternoon to spend on design as well. So on a great day, it's 4 hours. On a bad day, it's 0 hours. It probably averages out to 1 or 2 hours a day in terms of game design. The rest is all the other stuff that goes into running Stonemaier Games and creating content for the company that isn't game design content. Kevin says, how did you shift your prior work life over to running Stonemaier games? Any thoughts about how you dealt with that risk? That's a great question, Kevin. And yeah, so the short version of the story is after Euphoria funded on Kickstarter to the tune of around $300,000, I asked my full time boss. So I had a full time job at the time, another full time job. I was kind of running Stonemaier games full time, also had another full time job. I asked my boss if I could drop down to 4 days a week instead of five and take a 20% pay cut just to kind of try that. So I basically had a weekend in the middle of the week, a Wednesday in the middle of the week that I could focus solely on some of our games. And then I could do my work at this other company for 4 days a week. That was a great stepping stone, a low risk stepping stone that worked for me and worked for my boss that let me transition or at least test the waters into running Stonemaier games full time. And after doing that for around 5 months, I realized if I wanted Stonemaier games to have a chance, I really needed to just focus on that. And the other big thing at that time is that we had started to acquire localization partners. So we had other streams of revenue. We had better relationships with distributors at that point that were going to carry Euphoria. And at that point, we had delivered Euphoria to most backers and still had money left over. And so that was a key point. I think key thing for Kickstarter creators to remember is don't count your money on the day that you fund. Count your money on the day that you ship the last game to your backer. That is the day that you can count the extra money and decide if you want to reprint, if you want to reward yourself a little bit, pay yourself a little bit of a salary, things like that. So those are some of the stepping stones that I took to mitigate that risk before entering what I decided would be a year of going full time at Stonemaier Games to try it to see if it would work, and if it worked, awesome. If not, if I exhausted my savings that I had saved up to help me survive for that year, if I exhausted those savings, I would go back after a year and get a job with another company. That's how I did it. Yeah. Great question, though. I appreciate anyone who thinks about that risk rather than. I hear too many stories about Kickstarter creators funding, and then the day after they fund, they go full time for their company. And that is a huge risk. It's a huge risk for them, and it's a huge risk for their backers because they are then making the success of the game tied to the money rather than focusing on what they can deliver for their backers. I don't want to. I say that in a slightly judgmental way. I say it more in a concerning way for those creators and those backers. Douglas says, any thoughts on metal game pieces for Scythe? I have the mechs and money. Smaller men and metal airships would be awesome. So all of the stuff that exists for Scythe already exists. We're not making new stuff for Scythe. But if you don't have the realistic resources, there are, most of them are made out of resin, but the iron ingots are made actually out of metal. So if you get the realistic resources, you'll have more metal in the game as well. But no, we're not making metal characters or metal airships. Ivan says, I recently saw some kind of creator contest on Instagram, and I'm happy to report that you made the finals with Bruna Cathala. Do you think you will win? That's flattering. I wasn't aware of that contest. That's pretty cool. I hope that Bruno wins. I'm rooting for Bruno in this competition. I think he's from limited interactions I've had with Bruno. I think he's a wonderful man, and yeah, I hope Bruno wins for that. Let's see. Jesse says, does the Sleep Talk app, I was talking about how I laugh in my sleep, or I've been laughing in my sleep recently. Does the Sleep Talk app ever capture the late night combos of Walter and Biddy? Biddy actually sleeps in a separate room away from the bedroom. Walter does sleep in the bedroom and he sleeps soundly. He is a deep, deep sleeper. But Biddy sleeps in a different room because he can be a little feisty and because I think he sleeps better when Walter isn't around. He doesn't have to sleep with one eye open, basically. Gary says, any word on Wingspan on iOS? That's a great question for Monster Couch. I have asked that question to them many times and gotten answers, typically be saying like, oh, next month or the next month. But it's never actually been that. So I'm glad there are versions of Wingspan available on Switch and Steam, but I'll believe the iOS version when I actually see it. And I look forward to that day. Let's see, just scrolling through, looking for a few more questions for today. We have a few more minutes left. Jeremiah says he has a game design question for me. When you first start designing a game, do you usually just playtest it by yourself or with others? Also, when you playtest your games, do you usually play the game all the way through every time or just part of the way through? Two great questions there. I have done a little bit of both. Usually I playtest with Alan first. Like once I think that I have a barely functional version of the game, I'll call Alan over and we'll play it. Now I might involve Joe and Alex in that process too. But during the pandemic, I have done a little bit more solo playtesting just to see if the core mechanisms work before I present it to other guys on my team, other people on my team. And I don't always play all the way through. I mean, oftentimes I'll, especially if I'm just playtesting by myself, I might just playtest a little bit to see if the core mechanisms work, and then I'll branch out from there. But I try to eventually get to the process where I'm playing all the way through the game because that does have a big impact. The narrative arc of the game, is it going long enough? Is it going too short? That type of thing. So usually when I get together with people, we'll play it all the way through. Um, yeah, great question. But I think it's okay just to play part of the game, especially if something really isn't working and you can't just tweak it on the fly. It's okay to stop and say, hey, this isn't working. We'll reconvene later and pull out another game, pull out a published game and play another game while you're all there. Ahmed says, is there any game like Scythe in the upcoming plans? He says, in terms of minis, theme, has a board, a lot of expansions, campaign. Yeah, that's a big picture. I usually don't think that big picture going into a game. I usually try to think, okay, what's the best game that I can make out of the box right now? Something that I really believe in. And if it works, we'll expand it later. Um, in terms of theme, I mean, the games, I try to make all of our games have the theme tied to the mechanisms. A lot of our games have boards, but if a game doesn't need a board, I don't put a board in it. I think you're maybe talking about like the epic scope of Scythe. It is a little bigger, and I would say Tapestry is the most recent game that had that epic scope. That was a release a few years ago, but we still continually make expansions for Tapestry. So Tapestry, I would say, is in the life cycle of where Scythe was a year or two after the release of Scythe. But if you're looking for that game, I would say Tapestry is the one right now at Stonemaier Games. Your question is, are we working on any right now that will have that scope? Maybe. We'll see. In a slightly different way. Yeah. Bruce is the one that celebrates the number 23 with his wife, and he says he just celebrated 4 years of marriage, so he's got 19 years to figure out what to do to celebrate 23 years. Good answer, Bruce. Patrick says, speaking of Tapestry, we finally tabled it and have played it a handful of times. My wife loves it and can't wait to teach more people the game. I love the science and tech tracks, and my wife loves military and exploration. Jimmy, what do you focus on when you play? My typical approach in Tapestry, because I usually go into it a little undecided as to where I want to go, unless my sieve points me in a certain direction. I usually go for science early, and I let the roll of the dice in science determine the other track that I pair with it, and sometimes the other two tracks that I move forward with, and then I'll like stop on science and focus on those other two tracks. So it's literally kind of random the way that I focus on it early on in the game, and then I like to go deep at least down one of the tracks. Yeah. Kevin says plant-based plastics are available and lower carbon footprints. Kevin, yeah, that's a great point about packaging. We're talking about packaging for expansions. And we actually are finally, I thought we were going to do this a few months ago, but Panda encountered some issues with it. But we are finally converting all of our plastic bags in our games to biodegradable bags. They're corn-based, I believe, and they're fully biodegradable. They won't be as transparent as our current bags, but I think they're so much better for the environment that I think it's worth the loss of full transparency, being able to see through the plastic bags. So we are converting to that. And you're totally right. That could work for the right game. I don't think it would work for the Tapestry expansion because of the integrity of the insert in the box. But we are moving towards hopefully making all of our plastic out of biodegradable plastic. Yeah, especially plastic that could have a pretty good chance of being disposed of within a few years. Oh, Justin has a quick answer about the secret room question that I asked earlier. He says, my upstairs bedrooms have tiny closets. It's meant to allow for roof access. We, however, have kept them covered with blankets to keep it slightly hidden. That's pretty cool. I love that. I love secret rooms, secret passages, stuff like that. Let's see. Matthew says, I hope you're doing well. He got his copy of Red Rising. He's already played it a few times. He's loving the game. He says, my friend, Matthew's friend, made a comment regarding the size of the card. Is there a reason you used the 65 by 100 millimeter size of the card? Is it dependent on the art? Yeah, the idea here was we wanted to make the cards as big as possible to both feature the art and all the other things that we wanted on the card, including the size of the text, because we really wanted the text to be as readable as possible. We kind of maxed out what we could do there. And yes, we could have made the cards even bigger, but I think 65 by 100, which is the same size as Seven Wonders, is a nice big card size for you to fan out in your hand or put them in the card holders that we include in the collector's edition version of the game. We're basically kind of just maxing it out, just to fit everything on the card. And I don't know. I've heard some criticisms about it, but that have really surprised me because truly the reason we did this was for you. Like we wanted people to have more space on the card to see the art, to see the icons, to see the colors, to see the text, bigger text, things like that. So I know it makes them maybe slightly harder to sleeve, but Seven Wonders is a pretty popular game, and there are sleeves out there for Seven Wonders. So um, the intent behind that decision was customers focused. Yeah. Froyland says, is it possible to improve on how the games are packed? I saw some people receiving their games with ding and dents. I've experienced this as well. Um, I'm assuming you're talking about the way that we packed our games, Froyland. We give our fulfillment centers lots of feedback about how to do that. And since you've experienced this perfectly, it kind of is aside from what I'm mentioning here, but I think um, the number of reports we've had are incredibly small compared to the number of games that we ship, like a fraction of a percentage. So that can be expected for shipping anything. But it is something that I have brought up with one fulfillment center in particular because I was a little surprised by how they were packing some of the games, and glad that many of the games were arriving in good condition, but a little surprised by how thin the bubble wrap was, basically. So it is something that we think about, but in general, from the data that we have, it's a very, very small percentage of games that are arriving damaged. And we help out if people, if that's a problem. It's not a problem for everybody. If it's a problem for anyone, we're happy to help out with that. We have some solutions for that. But I did actually, I'm glad you said that because I haven't heard back from one of the fulfillment centers with whom we brought that up recently. Yeah. Tim says, I noticed Morton did the solo mode for Gaia Project and had to look him up for his other credits, which included a print and play game. Would you ever have interest in publishing a game by him if he had a design that fit with Stonemaier Games? I'm not sure if that's even something he's doing these days since he has a lot of Automa work. He actually has designed one product for us that isn't Automa, and that is he designed, I believe with David Studley, he designed the expansion to Euphoria. And I think Morton's takeaway from that process was that he enjoys making Automa a lot more than designing something, even an expansion for something that already exists. So I don't think that's an alley that Morton will go down. But for a cooperative game that plays multiplayer, if Morton ever had something that really fit within the Stonemaier ethos, it's certainly something I would consider if it was a multiplayer, up to 5 or 6 player cooperative game. Scroll down here. I'm about to run out of time, but I'm going to scroll down to see if there's any other questions here. Rafa says, do I use a laptop or a desktop? I use a desktop with 2 monitors, and it is a PC, not a Mac. I'm a PC guy. I do have a laptop for when I travel, though. Arthur says, can I share if there will be any customs-friendly shipping to Brazil for Stonemaier? I don't know if there is such thing, Arthur. Yeah, we haven't found a way to do that. I think the only way to be truly customs friendly for Brazil would be to ship to a company in Brazil, ship in like pallets to a company in Brazil, and then have that company ship to customers in Brazil. But the import fees are just so high. So it is possible. I guess I would say this. If you know of a fulfillment company that you really, really trust in Brazil that that we could work with, let me know. It's something that we could consider for that. But I think that's the only way to do it. We'd have to find a company that we really, really trust enough to send a whole pallet of games to and have them fulfill the games from within Brazil. Yeah. Manuel says, what was your last full-time job before committing 100% to Stonemaier? This is part of the story I was telling earlier. I worked at a facility as a director of operations, facility on the Washington University campus. Yeah. Wesley says, when you ran Kickstarter campaigns, did you pay for advertising? And if so, where? I don't think I ever did pay for. I'm trying to think if I ever did. No, I mean, I was mostly reviewer-focused marketing. I don't think I did any paid advertising. Actually, no, I did. I did on Board Game Geek. I paid for some banner ads on Board Game Geek, and I continue to do that for new games. I like the banner ads on Board Game Geek. Tim says, any idea when Metal Mechs for Scythe will be available again? I clicked for the notification on the website. Yeah, I think I put it in last week's e-newsletter. I think it'll be August or October. So in the late summer or fall is when we'll have them available again. And you did the right thing by clicking on that notification form on our website. Ragnar says he's new to heavier board games because of Red Rising. Welcome to the world of Red Rising then, Ragnar. I think the next game I'll get is one of the Between Two games, but I can't decide on which one. I usually play very casual games with family or friends. So would you recommend Between Two Cities because it's a little easier to explain? Off the cuff answer, yes. I think that's a good reason to go with Cities. It is lighter. It's more of a filler game. Or do I think building castles is so much more interesting? I do think building more castles is more interesting. In this case, it's a little bit of a heavier game, but I definitely think that cities is easier to introduce. Um, would you recommend both in a collection like Red Rising and Fantasy Realms? For what reasons would you recommend one over the other? I think it's basically, I think you've summed it up really well here. Between Two Cities is a nice gateway game. It's a light, short gateway game. It's easy to teach, easy to play, and if you find that you really like the core mechanisms in Between Two Cities, then you can level up and get Between Two Castles. Oops, sorry. I think that's a good summary of an approach that I would take. I would start with cities. Yeah, in your position. Tyler says, any plans to sell Stonemaier shirts? I know you usually have a design day one, but would love to sport a T-shirt for Stonemaier if one becomes publicly available. Yeah, I guess I should clarify that comment a little bit, Tyler. So we have two types of shirts. One is the shirt that you see me wearing here. This is what ambassadors can buy from us. It's a Stonemaier ambassador specific shirt. And we also have an annual shirt that we make available for Stonemaier champions to buy. And that's a shirt that we change a little bit every year. We don't have one for design day. Maybe we should have one someday, but we don't have one. But yeah, so we have those two shirts. And so if you are a Stonemaier champion, you'll be able to have access to that shirt later this year when we decide what the design will be for it. Rafa says, have I played Gloomhaven or Digital Gloomhaven, and what are your thoughts on it? I haven't played Digital Gloomhaven. I did play the core Gloomhaven game years ago. I was an original backer of the original campaign, played around 6 or 7 sessions of it, and decided it wasn't really for me. I think that was when I realized that that dungeon crawler games need to be a lot more for me than just fighting and killing a bunch of monsters for me to be engaged in them thematically. Despite how clever I think the mechanisms are in Gloomhaven, and so it was kind of a good learning point for me to learn about what I actually like about certain dungeon crawl games and not like about other dungeon crawl games. But I do have a video about Gloomhaven and the writing in the game. I really admire the writing, the story the game can tell. I have a video about that on my YouTube channel. All right, I think that brings us to the last of the questions. If you do have more questions after watching this, please go to the YouTube version of this video, which will be up there in about 10-15 minutes, and post them there. I'm happy to answer them there as far into the future as you want. I hope you have a wonderful Wednesday. Thank you for joining me today, and I will see you next week at the same time. I'll see you then. All right, take care. Bye.